the last 6 days. And he's also reminding me the topic that we're discussing tonight. And that is how to be proud as a Muslim. We can be proud. God has chosen us. No, He has chosen us. It's an incredible thought. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakallah khair. Ramadan Kareem. Ramadan Mubarak, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. I'm very happy to spend part of Ramadan, the first night of Ramadan, here in Lower Hutt with you. It's a great honor for me. So, my name is Samuel, named after Prophet Samuel. He's mentioned in Surah 2, ayah 247 to 249. It talks about the prophet who anointed Talut to be king of the Jews. The prophet's name was Samuel. He's not mentioned by name in Surah 2, but his name was Samuel. And this is the name my father gave me when I was born in South Carolina. My father would die 3 months after I was born, resulting from a plane crash. But he was a pilot, Navy pilot, based at the Charleston Naval Base in North Charleston, South Carolina. And that was the beginning of my life. People in Saudi Arabia, they ask me, how did you become a Muslim? Have any of you watched the video? If you don't know, I would like to share a little bit about that with you tonight. How did you become Muslim? People think I came to Saudi Arabia, I learned about Quran, I studied Quran, and I then became Muslim. That's not exactly how it happened. Before I left the United States, I'd worked for some 30 years in human rights and civil rights on behalf of religious prisoners of conscience around the world. Primarily Christian, because I was a Christian, but also for Jews, and also for Muslims in Romania and different places. People who had been in prison because of their faith. I was U.S. President of Christian Solidarity International, a type of Christian Amnesty International. The organization is based in Zurich, Switzerland, and I was head of the U.S. branch of the organization. I was living in Washington, D.C., and my responsibility was to organize U.S. congressmen and senators to travel with me to meet with foreign heads of state on behalf of people who were being imprisoned in these countries. If I went to visit a foreign head of state, they wouldn't meet with me. But if I took 2 or 3 congressmen who were interested in what I was doing with me, then that foreign head of state would meet with me. So we're strategizing now under Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation, and hopefully in the future we'll have U.S. congressmen and members of the Canadian and British Parliament traveling with us, so that when we get to a country, a foreign leader will meet with us and we can share with them our concerns for Muslims in that particular country. Well, I worked in that field for 30 years, and then I moved to Annapolis, Maryland, nearby. In Annapolis, I was head of the Democratic Party. We have 2 major political parties in America, Democrat and Republican. Republicans are elephants and Democrats are donkeys. That's the symbol. So I was a donkey. And I was very appreciated in the city because of my work in politics. I championed the cause of the poor. Primarily 20% of my city was African American, descendants of slaves, and I did my best to take care of them. Some of their streets had not been paved in 20 years in their communities, I immediately went into action, got them resurfaced, paved, and made their communities look better again so they could be proud. I headed a program that would introduce white pastors from suburban white churches to community housing. 20% of our residents, primarily African American, living in public housing, but they're sort of ostracized. If you go to my city, Annapolis, Maryland, it's the capital of Maryland. You look at the city, it looks very wealthy. You have yachts in the water, about 3,000 yachts. There's about $3 billion in boats floating in the waters on the Chesapeake Bay. You drive down the streets and you see 3,500 square foot homes with 3-car garages, a very wealthy city. But if you turn left or right and get off the main roads, then you see poverty. 20% of our residents lived in public housing. And I tried to help these public housing areas. They'd been neglected for so long. So I went to white churches and I would take white pastors to have dinner in a home in public housing. They'd never been in public housing before. But we wanted white churches to adopt different public housing areas and get involved. They would send tutors to help tutor children after school in the afternoon. They would be involved in training mothers in parenting skills. We set up computer laboratories for teenagers and young adults to learn how to use computers. We were doing a lot of things. We got medical clinics introduced into the housing areas so people could have specialized medical treatment just for their communities. Some of the public housing units were just deteriorating. They hadn't been repaired for years, so we got air conditioning and other things that made life more comfortable. We even had churches landscaping, going in, digging, planting trees, and making the communities look better so that people could be proud to say, this is my community. I was contacted by a man by the name Dr. Safi Kaskas. But before that, I went through a lot of trials and tribulations in my life. When I was running for mayor, people loved me. They appreciated me. I was supported by the poor and the middle class, and I had the majority of the votes going into the election. But I had a problem in my life, and my enemies played upon that problem and magnified it. They called me downtown, "Hey Sam, we're having a big party tonight. Come down to Ramshead Tavern, West Street." So I went down. I never bought alcohol to take it to my house. My house was sort of sacred territory. But they knew that if they could put a glass of alcohol in front of me, I would pick it up and swallow it. They knew that if I were with them, I would smoke with them, I would drink with them, I would party with them. The situation for me was not a good one. They get me downtown. "Hey Sam, let's have fun tonight. We're going into the primary election. Just relax and enjoy yourself." They're drinking, and every time they drank, they put a drink in front of me. I must have had about 15 shots of vodka that night with Coca-Cola. And I walked at 11 o'clock. They said, "Come outside." I was walking around in the bar totally drunk. I was saying vulgar things to the women who were sitting there and to the men. And I was just not normal. At 11 o'clock, they gave me another shot of vodka. They said, "Come outside, get some fresh air." I walked outside. There were 3 TV cameras pointed at me. And I'm swinging my arms at the cameras and pushing them away and swearing and cursing. And all of this would be on TV every 30 minutes for the next several days. I drove away from there, and I don't even remember driving away. I got home eventually. My car was parked outside. The next morning, 2 days later, that was on a Friday, 2 days later, actually 3 days later on a Monday, the police come to my house and they told me that somebody had filed charges against me. And they said, remember this, do you remember that? I didn't remember anything. There were two causes for that, not just the alcohol, but I was on a drug called Wellbutrin, which I took every morning to calm my nerves. And Wellbutrin and alcohol don't mix. It's a total blackout. So I didn't remember anything, but eventually it went to court. And I was convicted. Their word against my word. But I didn't remember anything. So I went to jail for 2 days. Not a big thing, you might think, 2 days in jail. For me, it was a big thing because the TV cameras followed me into the jail and they followed me out of the jail. And I went into a very long psychological depression. Now, I had 15 years theological studies, Christian studies, and that's why they were interested in me. Well, I said, I'll think about it. I tried to get a job selling men's clothing at JCPenney's department store. I tried everything. I tried getting a job as an attendant in a service station, cashier. People come in and buy gas, and I would run their credit cards. But nobody would hire me. I was already 65 years old, and actually 64 years old. Nobody wanted anything to do with me, or they'd heard of the scandal that was in the newspaper. And I felt pretty destitute. And at home, I'd sit home at night and Satan whispering in my ear, "You're a bad father. You're a bad husband. You can't even provide a house for your family to live in. You can't take care of your family. You are a bad husband." It's going over and over and over in my mind. A group of Quaker Christians surrounded me. Do you know who the Quakers are? There are some Quaker churches here in New Zealand. We spoke at one a couple of days ago in Auckland. They organized a clearness, they called Clearness Committee. They would just sit with me once or twice a month and ask me questions, usually in their home over a meal, just to get me out of my house. And they would say, just ask questions. They wouldn't tell me what to do. They would say, "Do you think maybe, have you been out of your house this week?" And I would say, "Not really." "Don't you think it would be a good idea for you to leave your house once or twice a week?" I would say, "Yes, probably it would be a good idea." And this is how they pulled me out of this depression, out of the situation I was in. But after they finished with me, then God passed me on to Dr. Safi Kaskas in Wellington, the man who wanted me to come to Saudi Arabia. Well, there was nothing else I could do. No other door was open to me. So I said, "Okay, I'll come." And then my friends at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, students and professors there, they started coming to me, showing me videos of people getting their heads chopped off in the Middle East, throats cut by Al-Qaeda and other groups. And I started thinking, well, I'm not going to do this. But then there was no other door open. So I went to Saudi Arabia, but when I arrived in Saudi Arabia, I was afraid. I was afraid to walk on the street. I was afraid to go out by myself because, of what I had seen on television in the United States. Eventually, you get hungry, you have to go to a supermarket. Dr. Safi's driver wasn't available to drive me, so I walked to the supermarket. Every time somebody passed me on the street, I would look over my shoulder to make sure they didn't pull out a knife. But people would stop me on the street. They would say, "Who are you?" I was white. I didn't look like the rest of them. And they would say, "Where are you from?" And I would say, I would nervously say, "I'm from the United States." And they would reach out and hug me and say, "Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome." I was shocked. That wasn't what I was expecting. So for 6 months now, I'm reading this new English translation of the Quran that's being prepared specifically for America. At night I would read. In the morning I would ask questions. Sometimes in the afternoon I would get out, go around the town. Everybody was very friendly to me. I kept running across verses in the Quran about Isa and Maryam, things Christians do. That Isa did many miracles. That he was born of the Virgin Mary. That Isa raised people from the dead and healed the sick and made the blind to see. I didn't realize this was in the Quran. After reading for 6 months, I came across a verse that said, I kept reading about the people of the book. I must have read the Quran 20 times in 6 months. It was required of me in order to do the work I was supposed to do. But God kept showing me different things. And the Quran enlightened me on the Bible. I had memorized large parts of the Bible, especially the Zabur. And I'm reading things in the Quran and experiencing life in Saudi Arabia, which threw light on what I had studied in the Bible. I came across a verse that says, there are, I think it's Surah 3, Ayah 110. It says, there are amongst the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, there are some who are Muslim. I was shocked. I remembered the words of my mother when I was a child. She used to take me to First Baptist Church in Jefferson, Georgia. Very small church. Very small town, 1,800 people. Ibrahim's God. She would take me home, she would put me in her lap, she would open the book and she'd start reading to me the story of Abraham, how he left his mother and father because they were worshiping idols, and God sent him to a far country where he would be free to worship the one true God. And my mother would look into my eyes, Christian though, and she would say to me, Sammy, look, pay attention, look at me. Sammy, when you're older, you have to pray to the God of Abraham. There's only one God, Sammy. I was taught that by a Christian mother. And that, in essence, is Islam. Now I'm sitting in Saudi Arabia and reading in the Quran that there are some amongst the Christians and the Jews who are Muslim. And I realized that I was one of them. There's another place in the Quran that I read that people of the book, when they began to read the Quran and they began to understand the Quran, or when they hear the words being recited and they began to understand, they start to weep and cry and they say, Wallahi, Wallahi, ana Muslim. It was me. So when you see that Christian or Jew walking down the street, don't count them off as lost or as an enemy of Islam. Many of them are not. I think there are about 80 million Christians in America who were taught what I was taught when I was a child. My colleagues and I, we travel the world now, not just speaking in mosque, and I enjoy doing this wherever possible. I'm very happy to be here at your mosque this evening. But we speak in churches and to Jewish groups, and we explain to them what is Islam. And we're finding this 80 million who are probably taught to worship the God of Abraham, that there's only one God. We're looking for them through social media, through radio, television, by speaking in churches, into Jewish groups and on university campuses, to let them know that some of them most likely are Muslim and they don't even know it, and this is what Islam is about. We put a chart up on the wall in front of them. We project it on the wall. The 6 pillars of faith. 1, belief in one God. Angels. We believe in angels. We believe in all the holy books, including Old and New Testament of the Bible, Torah, Injil, Zabur, on and on. We believe in all the prophets, from Adam all the way through to Musa, Noah, all of them, right through to Asa. But we have one more prophet, Muhammad. We believe that there's going to be a great judgment day when all men stand before God and have to pay and have to they'll be held accountable for what they did in this life on this earth. And we believe in predestination. We believe there's only one God. Of course, the Christians divide him up into 3 pieces, which is heresy. But they're beginning to understand now what is Islam. Recently, President Trump tried to stop Muslims from coming into America. What was the reaction? Christians and Jews went to the airports and demanded that the Muslims be permitted to enter the United States. They blocked all the airports. They stood there as Muslims were finally permitted by immigration to exit the airport, and they applauded and cheered. Churches in Boston and other places played azan from the bell towers of the churches. And Muslims hearing it would stop in the street, kneel, and pray. And the Christians were cheering them. I've got videos of it. God is doing something marvelous in many countries today, just as he's doing marvelous things in New Zealand. The tragedy that happened 2 months ago, now 51 people have died from those attacks. 51 martyrs. We're here to thank the Prime Minister of New Zealand and the people of New Zealand for the incredible, loving, compassionate response to that tragedy. The lady's deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize. We brought a prize to her from Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. We are calling her Peacemaker, Champion of Peace. I wish that other leaders of the world would learn to react to situations like this as she did. She's an example not just to New Zealand, but to the entire world. I pray for other leaders to be raised up by God. That's what Muslim Voice for Peace is about. Now I'll go on and move ahead. I'll get to MVPR. what we're doing. But the 6 months in Saudi Arabia, 6 months studying Quran, 6 months figuring out what my mother taught me as a child, I'm a Muslim. So I wanted to go to a mosque. I lived in an office building facing a mosque, and there was a balcony, and I would go out on the balcony, and I saw people going in the mosque, coming out of the mosque. To me, it looked like a typical American, just normal people, children playing football in the church park, in the mosque parking lot. And I wanted to be with people who were praying. So I asked Dr. Safi, can you take me to the mosque? Introduce me. And he would never say yes, and he would never say no. After a month, and I just said, okay, I'm going. I went. But I was a Christian pastor. I didn't know if I was permitted to go inside the mosque. I knew I couldn't go to Mecca. I had passed signs that said Muslims only. So I walked down the street and I knocked on the door. I didn't want to go anywhere that wasn't supposed to be. I saw people opening the door, they would go in, but I was standing there knocking. Finally, Shafiq Zubair, who was a Rohingya Muslim from Burma, he was the muaddin at the mosque, caller to prayer. He came out with an interpreter and he said, may I help you? And I said, yes, my name is Samuel. I'm a Christian from the United States. Is it okay if I come inside the mosque? And Shafiq said, Alam wa sahlan. He hugged me. He said, come in. And I went to the back of the mosque and I just sat in a chair. And I watched. For 3 days, every time there was a call to prayer, I went to the mosque. I sat in the back and I watched. I felt God's presence there. I felt His Spirit there. I felt His love from the people there who were greeting me. They wanted to know who I was. I said, I'm a Christian from America. I just want to learn about Islam. They were so friendly. Nobody tried to force me to be a Muslim. I had already figured out mostly that I was Muslim from what my mother taught me. Now, after 3 days, I said to Shafiq, can you teach me to pray like a Muslim? I saw people standing, bowing, putting their face to the floor. I didn't understand. He said, yes, of course. And he taught me Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. It was incredible. But I was only memorizing sounds. I didn't know what the sounds meant. So I would compare what I was memorizing to what was in the translation that we were working on. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the distributor of mercy and grace. And I found out, that I could ask God directly to forgive me of my sins, which were so many. It was a great relief. A few days later, I would go to Islamic Education Foundation in Al-Hamra, neighborhood of Jeddah, and I said Al-Shahada. And I went directly to Mecca. And when I saw the Kaaba, it was the most wonderful experience I'd ever had in my life. Later, I went to Medina. I've been to both Mecca, and sometimes I go every week to pray with friends from my mosque. We live just 45 minutes from Mecca. I've been to Medina most recently, a couple of weeks ago. Asa and I were there. That mosque, Asa and I organized Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. Reconciliation means to bring people who are fighting together, to forgive one another. So, Asa and I, and now Nibal, go all over the world, speaking to Christian groups and Jewish groups. I'm traveling more and more into nations where there's war and conflict. I've just come from Iraq about 4 weeks ago. I've been to Iraq twice in the last 6 months or 8 months. We're working on a peace initiative there to rebuild schools for children of war. I feel so fulfilled and so blessed to be a Muslim, and that God can use someone like me. Yeah, I wanted to be mayor of Annapolis and governor of Maryland. You know, another thing happened to me in Saudi Arabia. I met a man by the name of Dr. Mohammed Al-Hajj Hussein. had done many environmental projects while I was a Democrat, trying to fight global warming and sea level rise, because our city was only 1.5 feet above sea level at high tide. And our streets were flooding more and more. What are we going to do about it? So when I went to Saudi Arabia, I was interested also in environmental concerns. I met Dr. Mohammed Al-Hajj Hussein, who invited me to his home for dinner. And sitting at the table were 6 sons. And I said to Dr. Mohammed, I said, "This is wonderful. What a great family you have." I said, "I have only one child, a daughter. I love her very much, but I never had a son. I always wanted a son." I was joking. I said, "Give me one of yours." Dr. Mohammed said, "Take Asa." So Asa is working with me now. He's here tonight. Asa? I call him Jesus. Asa is Arabic for Jesus. So when I take Asa to a Christian church and I introduce him as Jesus, and the people are saying, "We thought he was Muslim." No, I said, "Yes, a Muslim named Jesus. What are you talking about?" I said, "Yeah, you don't know that Jesus is in the Quran. The parents, to be a Muslim, you have to love Jesus. And the people in Saudi Arabia love Jesus so much that many of them name their kids Jesus. This is one of them." There's so much misunderstanding in the world today. Christians, for the most part, especially conservative Christians in the United States, think that Muslims hate them and are going to kill them. And when I come to Saudi Arabia, many Muslims think that Christians hate them, use them. But that's not always the case. You know, not all Jews are Zionist and against Palestine. There's an organization in the United States called Jewish Voice for Peace. We work with them on Palestinian issues. They produce the best videos on why Palestine should be free. So, sometimes the news media projects an image that isn't true. An image of us, an image of others, and sometimes we just need to sit down and talk to each other and find out what we have in common. That doesn't mean that we're going to agree, but we need to speak together, as the Quran tells us, respectfully. And we can eventually come to an agreement. If not, to them their faith, to us our faith, but we don't kill each other. We don't fight with each other. Days ago, great response. They wanted to know about Islam. We were able to talk to them directly about what is Islam. And hopefully God can use that to, we just put out the word, God does the calling and the changing. So That brings us down here to Christchurch. We were hoping to meet with the Prime Minister face to face. Wellington, sorry, thank you. We're not in Christchurch yet. That brings us here to Wellington. And that's what we hope to meet with the Prime Minister today or tomorrow, but she's not available. But we did bring special prize for her, as I said earlier. And we want her to feel, to know that Muslims around the world appreciate her and love this country because of its incredible response to the tragedy of Christchurch. Do any of you have any questions about what we're doing? I'd be glad to answer those at this time. Nibal, tell me when I'm out of time. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned you have reached a political point. A lot of Islamic countries, journalists are put in jail, like Egypt. And there are a lot of, even maybe in Saudi Arabia, scholars are in jail. So do you approach these people?
I've been to Egypt many times. I have friends who are members of Muslim Brotherhood. I know Muslim Brotherhood to be a good organization. There is some conflict now between certain countries and other countries. I won't comment directly on Saudi Arabia. I'm a guest in the country. I'm living there with an iqamah that I don't want to lose. But pray for the leaders of Saudi Arabia. Pray for the leaders of Egypt. It's not an easy time in the world today when people campaign for justice and freedom and they're denied it. But there have been positive changes in Saudi Arabia over the last year. So we hope for the best. We're working with Saudi youth. We work in the prisons, Asa and I. Asa is my son. He speaks fluent Arabic and English, so he's my interpreter in the prisons. I can go in and tell them, I sit in their jail cells with them, and I say, you see that bed over there? That was me. I was in that one. I was there for alcohol and drugs. So this is, we can, our ministry is twofold. One, to teach non-believers about Islam. And two, to teach Muslims about Islam. There are a lot of people who are born Muslim who, by their behavior, are not Muslim. So we need to help these brothers to grow in faith. We need to befriend them. When they're in trouble, we need to help them stand up again. And I see that happening in New Zealand. I saw it in Auckland. And I know that many of you come here from so many different countries. You obeyed God. It says in the Quran, when you can't live where you've been living, the world is big and wide, go somewhere else. And you've done that. Some of you came here single. Some of you came here, you were already married, they had children. And you set up a life here. And God is blessing you here in this country. So I pray for you. But I also pray that you don't forget the country you came from. Stay in touch with your people back at home and do what you can do to help spiritually in that country. Syria is in great turmoil. I visited parts of Iraq. Daesh was defeated in Mosul just less than 2 years ago, and in Beji 3 years ago. But the cities are still in ruin from the bombing, the shelling, from the war. And nothing's being done to rebuild these cities. So we want to see schools built for children. Many of the children are psychologically damaged from the war. They don't have parents. You see them begging on the streets, banging on the car windows when you drive down by. These places desperately need help. I have plans to go to Afghanistan and other places. I've been in Myanmar, or Burma, where the Rohingyas are so terribly persecuted. I've been in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. People going to the refugee camps, they've been there for 35 years now. This is not life. 35 years in a refugee camp. There are 60 million refugees in the world today. 95% are Muslim. But what are we going to do about it? We can't be silent when God has blessed us. We have to do something. We have to help. Anger doesn't do anybody any good. And wars are even more hurtful and harmful. We need to find ways to make peace, to build our economies, so that we can stabilize our own lives and our own families. But everyone deserves this. So pray for us at Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation as we continue our work. We have some, Asa is going to show you some shirts that we've made, or someone made for us, to help promote the work that we're. And the website. We have a website.
This is the front of the shirt, Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. This is our organization's name. And then in the back, Arabic, English, and Hebrew.
This word this shirt's being used in the Middle East. Hebrew, Arabic, and English to help promote peace amongst Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And it's being worn everywhere now.
Then there's another shirt that says Muslim Voice for Peace in the front with the same name as here. And then we also have a website